Good morning, Del,
Morning.
from Hawaii.
Aloha.
Aloha, my friend.
Very good.
Very good. Thank you.
We have a Hawaii rain going through here in Idaho right now. Very nice, gentle, good rain.
I really enjoyed your presentation yesterday. Learned a lot from you.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome. Good morning, GPS. Man, I am so excited to see everybody on here. Brent, I absolutely love your background, virtual background. I love it, man. Well, hey, today, this morning, almost late morning or almost afternoon for some of you, but tonight for me and Mr. Michael on midnight, we have a special treat with this Good Morning GPS. Because today we have a guest speaker that I think some of you had the opportunity to hear him share his story, share his knowledge, gave us almost like the preview of what he's going to be giving us this morning, last night. This gentleman was personally mentored and spent last 7 years of a gentleman named Mr. Napoleon Hill. Many of you probably read the book Think and Grow Rich. I remember picking up my Think and Grow Rich when I was 18 years old, and my life was never the same after reading the book. I can't even imagine being able to have a conversation with him, and not just once, but twice, but 7 years of time. He shared the story with us last night. Hopefully he shares more of those stories with you today, how he met this gentleman when he was 80 years old, when he was only 21 years old, and spending 7 years traveling and learning from him have completely altered the course and gave him an incredible 50-plus year career as an entrepreneur. And I cannot wait myself tonight to this morning for you to take notes. I just want to encourage every single one of you, take this morning session very seriously. It's not just Good Morning GPS this morning, it's Special Morning GPS this morning. Opportunity like this does not happen every day. When I was 20 years old, I met a gentleman, he was 67 years old, been an entrepreneur for 42 years. And it's my 6-7 years with him that has helped me to become who I am today, that has altered my thinking and my habits and my philosophy and taught me to become who I am today. And I believe having an opportunity like this morning where you, from your comfort of your home, you didn't have to fly 10 hours to hear this gentleman's training. You didn't have to drive 10 hours or fly across the country to hear this gentleman, but you have an opportunity to be mentored by one of the greatest legends in the industry of personal development and entrepreneurship this morning. So I want to encourage every single one of you to do 3 things. Number 1, get your pen and paper out. take notes and learn. Number two, even though there's going to be hundreds of people on this Good Morning GPS call this morning, don't worry about everybody else. Think of it and treat it as if it's just you and Mr. Dale Williams having a one-on-one conversation. Treat it as if everything he's sharing with us this morning is just for you. And number three, think about how, don't be just amazed with the information. Think about the application on how everything he shares with you. If you and I could apply what he teaches us this morning, I know every single day, if we practice what he's going to teach us this morning, our lives will get better. We will become better. We'll become better leaders. We'll become better entrepreneurs. We're going to have more success. So I am so excited. I am honored to be able to introduce him personally on this call on our Good Morning GPS session this morning, second to the last one. We're so honored to have you, Mr. Dale Williams. Thanks for joining us, and we can't wait to hear your message this morning. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Dale Williams. Welcome to the call.
It's so nice to be on with you today for this GPS Good Morning. And I do have a lot of thoughts I'd like to share. You know, I appreciate the introduction. I'm going to try and cover a little bit about my background, just so you'll know where I'm coming from. Danny did a great job of kind of tying it to the Napoleon Hill trainings that I was fortunate to have, but there's a couple other things. So I'm going to kind of touch on 5 things that have really influenced my life. So I grew up on a farm. I'm actually at the farm in Idaho now. I didn't get back to our home in Utah, and stayed over, and honored to be here. But I grew up on this farm, and back then it was a farm. We did a lot of things, none of them very big. So we milked cows, we had chickens and hogs and beef cattle, and we raised all kinds of crops. And so we did a little bit of everything, and nothing very, very big. So the point is that on this farm, where I had 5 brothers, or 4 brothers. Myself, I'm number 4. My mom died when I was little, so my dad raised these 5 boys on the farm. And so we were working before the sun came up and working after the sun went down. The only thing that my father would give us permission to not be at work on the farm was to play on the high school ball teams or to go to church. So as you guessed, all 5 of us, we played football, basketball, baseball, and track year round, and we never missed a church meeting. And even though that really plays big into what I did, because on the farm, I learned the law of the harvest. I learned that you could not harvest something you do not plant. And then later, as I got to work with Napoleon Hill, he helped me understand how the mind works, just like fertile soil. And I'll cover that in a minute. But I also, in sports, learned teamwork. I learned that I got to play on some wonderful teams. One was undefeated. And we beat a lot of teams that were much more talented than us, but we worked together. We had each other's back and trust. And the things that I learned to be somewhat successful in athletics really have carried through my whole life. So one time out on the farm, I remember driving the tractor. We had one field just across from where I'm sitting now, 85 acres. And so it would take a long time to make one turn around that field. And I saw an airplane come up over the horizon, go all the way across the sky and disappear. And I'm still going down the same road. And so I said to myself, I don't know what they do. I didn't know what pilots were necessarily at that point, but I want to be one. Don't want to be driving this tractor all my life. And so as a pilot, it didn't happen the way I wanted to. But it happened. So be careful what you dream, because it can come about. So between my junior and senior year in college, I received a draft notice. Now I had a deferment, but I still got a draft notice to go to the Vietnam War. Nothing against, and I have great admiration for infantrymen and people in the Army, but I wanted to be a pilot. And so through the things that I learned with Napoleon Hill, I was able to get out of that and get it switched into the 2-year ROTC program at the university I was going to, and on into pilot training. As Danny mentioned, I was 21 years old in 1963, 57 years ago, about this time. It was in the spring, had the good fortune of being introduced to Napoleon Hill. And I didn't even know who he was at the time. I hadn't read his book, but I had an older brother that came to me when I was 15 years old. And he said, Del, he knew how much sports meant to us and how much getting out of work was for us. Because I couldn't see that all the work we were doing was bringing any change in his life. We grew up, my five boys and my father, at a little place now that's been restored by my older brother, and it's barely 600 square feet, 2 tiny bedrooms in the other room, and no running water in the house. And so you can imagine, with no mom and no sisters, what it might have been like growing up. And I wanted more things, including a bathroom inside the house. And so that became a goal for me. So when I built this house, I have 5 bathrooms and 5 restrooms. So anyway, I'm very excited to tell you about when I was 21 years old and had the good fortune to meet Napoleon Hill. He asked me some questions. I told him my story. And at that point, I think the Napoleon Hill Foundation was formed in 1962. They're in the process of doing the Napoleon Hill Academy, which was to teach the laws of success and the science of personal achievement and get it into the school system. So that was in the making. It's actually happened in February of 1964. And so I was one of his very first instructors that was teaching my story and how that you could apply the philosophy. Sorry, let me turn this off. And in doing so, he helped me understand who I wanted to be, what I wanted to become, and why that was important. He helped me understand that attitude was the most important thing. That would determine how far you go in anything, or your altitude. And so teaching those principles and learning them was probably the greatest thing that ever happened in my life. Because if you've read the book Think and Grow Rich, which is a summary of the 8 volumes of the Laws of Success that he wrote in the mid-30s, 1930s, during the Depression, at the request of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who is an assistant to him. Some of you may have read how during that time, the Depression and World War II and things, that the President of the United States would give these fireside chats. Well, Napoleon Hill wrote those. And probably the most famous is, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." And so a little bit about Napoleon Hill. He was born in 1883. It's amazing. 1883. And so when he was 25 years old, he just got married, wanted to go to law school at George Washington Law School. And so he took a job as a writer for a magazine, and his assignment was interview successful people and write articles. His very first assignment was to drive to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and meet with Andrew Carnegie, who is the president of the United States Steel Corporation and recognized at that time as the world's richest man. So he went out there for a 3-hour interview. That interview lasted 3 days. At the end of the 3 hours, Andrew Carnegie says, "We're just getting started. I want to tell you more." And so he stayed. Now, Napoleon Hill, so you understand, at that point, had no money to stay at a hotel. He just had money to get enough gas to drive back home. But Andrew Carnegie was kind enough to put him up in his beautiful mansion there in Pennsylvania. And so at the end of these 3 days, and this is very significant in all of our choices and the things we do. At the end of these 3 days, Andrew Carnegie told Napoleon Hill that I have one question, and I want a yes or a no. And he didn't tell him, but unbeknownst to Napoleon Hill, he had a stopwatch. And he was going to give him 60 seconds to decide, because he'd give him all the information so he knew what it was. And the question was something like this: I want to commission you to spend probably 20 years to do this project, to interview all the people you can who have not reached what they want. And I'll introduce you to hundreds of the most successful people in the world, mostly here in the United States. Excuse me. And I want you then to write the philosophy. Now, by commissioning him, he was not going to pay him, because he wanted him to learn the process and apply it, so that he was not just reporting, but he was living it. And so after Napoleon Hill heard this, he would always ask us, what would you think? The world's richest man just offered you a job for no pay for 20 years, and you got to go home and tell your new bride this story. And he said, as I was thinking that, the thought popped into my mind, he must see something in me that I don't see in myself. And then he says, like a voice in his head said, do it. Tell him you'll do it. So he blurted out, I'll do it and I'll see it through. And Andrew Carnegie said, I like your answer and I like the way that you said it. And he stopped the watch and they'd taken 27 seconds. Now, Napoleon Hill always told us that most people in America fail because of the inability to make a timely decision. That means we're great procrastinators. How many times have you talked to somebody about something, maybe even about what we're talking about today, and somebody say, well, let me think about it. Now, there's nothing wrong with thinking about it. It's a very good thing to do, to think about it. But many times when I check back a week or 10 days later, the answer is, oh, haven't had a chance to think about it. And so it's just a way that as Americans and probably all over the world, we kind of put off making a decision. Now, sometime we'll talk about the decision process and how to go through that so that you can make a decision. And what I would encourage you, whether it's GPS or anything in your life, look at it, look at the pros and cons, and then make your decision. Because there's power in being able to exercise the power of choice. I will, just going to say it a little bit later, excuse me. But I have learned through my life, and maybe many of you have, that there's two things that really separate the human race, men and women and children, from all the other living things on the earth. One is imagination, and two is choice. Now, those are huge things, because if you read the book, Think and Grow Rich, the first chapter is about thoughts are things. And they're powerful. And when mixed with emotions, and there's positive and negative emotions, when mixed with emotions, they become magnetic, good or bad, because there's positive and there's negative emotions. And so maybe I'll just throw it in here, but in some research that was done, and I mentioned this yesterday, or last night, that research was done in the 1990s that I was part of, and the basic understanding of the summation of that was that 9 out of 10 people, 92% of the time, their dominant thought is about things they don't want. Now think about that. If you're sitting in a room, there's 9 other people and yourself, and you look around, statistically speaking, there's only one of you that's going to use the thinking process and the power of thoughts and of creation and all those things, because everything is created physically, was either created mentally or spiritually. And so you have the ability, I have the ability to be able to somewhat create our own universe, our own living by the way we think. Now, back on the farm, my father used to always tell us, if you think a thought long enough, it has to express itself in some type of an action. When you repeat that action enough times, it becomes a habit. We as human beings are creatures of habit, and that's our character, and that's who we are. If so, we want to change a habit, we want to change something, we need to change how we think about it. All the years that I was a pilot, I never smoked or drank or anything like that, but almost all, or many of the pilots in those long flights to Asia and stuff, and somebody was smoking a cigarette, I'd just get a headache and things. I was so glad when it didn't. But I know so many people who wanted to quit smoking. I'm not picking on smoking. I'm just saying that this is a discussion we had a lot. And here's what I would see. Somebody would say, well, I've gone 10 days, but oh man, I wish I could have a cigarette. See, they're still thinking as a smoker until they can start thinking as a non-smoker and why they don't want to smoke. And their reason becomes big enough to start changing their actions and then their habits, and then they will have accomplished that. So it's a process that we go through in doing so. So back to Napoleon Hill, he did spend 25 years interviewing 25,000 people, and 504 of the most successful people that Andrew Carnegie introduced him to. And from that, he put together what was called the 8 volumes of the Laws of Success, of which Think and Grow Rich is a summary. Now, back to my, when I was 15 years old, I had an older brother that came to me and he said, Del, if I could tell you a way that you could be the best athlete in your school, would you be interested? He was smart enough to know I probably wouldn't read a book or I couldn't understand the philosophy, but he hit my hot button and I would do anything to do that. And so he told me all the things in Think and Grow Rich without telling me that's what it was. He related to the sport that I wanted to be good in. Later, he told me I could do it in any sport. You can do it in academics. You can do it in personal relationships. It's the same basic principle. And so thoughts are things. I can't emphasize that enough. And when you put emotion with it, they become magnetic. And that's what the law of attraction is attracting to you the things that you want. Now, if you don't understand the law, 9 out of 10 people in America now, according to that research, is attracting the very thing they don't want. They're thinking about their worries. They're thinking about their challenges or problems. And they get very, very negative. So in the last 50 years, as I've been blessed to travel all over the world, I've been to over 70 countries. I have friends in most of them. If I made a phone call, they'll meet me at the airport in their limousine or their rickshaw or whatever it is in that country. Because they're relationships we built, because we care about each other. We care about each other's success, about their families, all those type of things. We all have that human need to be loved, to be cared for, and we have a need to love other people. And as we do it through service or whatever, then we start attracting these positive vibrations. If not, we get into complaining and everything's wrong. And I've met a lot of people, even people who have told me, even good leaders sometimes, that they're a very positive person. But if you're in a discussion for 5 to 10 minutes, almost all of us start to focus on negatives. So let me try and help you understand how I stood. This is what Napoleon Hill, when he knew that I grew up on a farm, he said, good, then you understand the power of fertile soil. Yep. You know, if you don't plant anything, what happens? The weeds grow in abundance. So the fertile soil doesn't care whether you grow weeds or you grow a garden. If you grow a garden or you want to grow something, you have to know what you want. You can't plant tomatoes and get corn. You know, my 8 decades now living, I've never noticed, never found that that's ever happened. It can't, because it's a law. So the law of the subconscious mind and the law of attraction says that we plant in our subconscious mind, which most all of you know and understand, it's the power in us. Conscious mind is what we're doing right now as we talk, we think, we make decisions and so on. But the subconscious mind is powerful. It's neutral, like fertile soil. It doesn't care what you plant. It takes an order from the conscious mind to bring a reality to you. So that's why it's very important what we think and how we think, and particularly when we add emotion to it. And so in the world we live in today, almost everything is negative. You can't turn on the news. It's all negative because people want to hear the negative stories, they say, not the positive ones. And so it's up to us to be able to make that choice of the things that we visualize or we dream about or we imagine. We can actually start to create our own environment. So what the animals do and all the other creatures is they react. And that's what many of us do today is we react. We let other people determine what kind of day we're having. So I remember one time I was about 9 years old in a little town 8 miles from here where we would go to shop and so on. There was a little kind of newspaper cigar stand. And every time we'd walk by, my dad would say hello or good morning, hope you're having a great day. This guy would blah, 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 something real negative. And one time I just said to my dad, why do you waste your time saying hello to that guy? And he said, oh, I never let somebody else determine the kind of day I'm going to have. I'm going to be kind and say hi to people regardless of what they say. And besides, if you really get down, he likes us to say hi to him and acknowledge him. So I thought about that a lot, and it's so true. And yet we make judgments on people when we see how they act or what they do. We don't know the circumstances. And there's a good reason the good book says not to judge, you know, leave that to someone else. So the power of the mind then is just like planting seeds in fertile soil. And I've done that my whole life. Here on the farm and the ranch, we mostly now just raise Black Angus cattle, and we raise alfalfa to feed them. But when we were doing all that, it's not that easy. Here's what farmers do. If you have a garden, you know that. There's a time to plant. There's a time to it's very important to select the right seeds, exactly what you want, because if you plant bad seeds, you're going to get a bad crop. But once you plant, fertilize the soil, you prepare the soil, you plant the seeds, then you have to nourish it for a long time. That's a lot of work. And then when the time for harvest comes, you may have a chance to harvest. Well, if that's the way it is in nature, why don't we realize that's the way it is here? Because there's a law of opposition. I noticed the weeds grow many, many times easier in the soil than they do the crops that you want to raise. And I also realized that sometimes you work hard at the end of the time. We had a frost one time just before we harvest. Another time hail came through and wiped everything out. And so what does a good farmer do? Keeps on planting. He plants again next year and next year. And we keep doing that because we believe and we know that if we do things right, we have a chance for a harvest. Well, after I worked with Napoleon Hill, I had the good fortune, not knowing anything about it, but out of a need, and the solution to the need I had as I was going off to war, I was introduced to relationship marketing. I didn't know what it was, but I had a good friend in Idaho. He's now my brother-in-law. He married my wife's sister, and he just called me up. I was getting ready for my final check ride to be certified in the airplane. I was going to be flying in Vietnam, and he just called me up, and he knew I was busy, and he said, Del, I just want you to know I got this new business, and you can work it anytime you have a few minutes. He knew I would be owned by the Air Force in war for the next 6 years. And he said, just work it when you can, and you can make $200 or $300 a month. Well, I had calculated out going into the Air Force as a second lieutenant, I was getting paid just under $600 a month, and I couldn't make that last the whole month. And I was moving my wife to California. She'd never been to California before, Norton Air Force Base, and I was heading off to Vietnam. And so I had been visualizing for 2 weeks. Somebody would come, can tell if it's a man or woman, and they had an answer for me. This was my own visualization, my own thinking, and it would solve my problem. Well, as soon as he said that, I just said, sign me up. I'm ready. This is exactly what I want. Didn't know what it was. Won't tell you that story now, but it's a pretty interesting story. Anyway, we had a wonderful 6.5 years. The first month, by the way, we earned $300. And every month thereafter, we did that or up to 10 times as much over the 6 years. Then it was done away with because they sold to a bigger company and they did away with network marketing. And then I learned really what residual income was, because for the next almost 2 years, every time that all I needed to do is make one phone call and buy a $15 product, and I still got paid because we had a lot of customers and a lot of people kept ordering. So even though it went down a little bit, for the next 2 years, I got paid for something I did years before. And it clicked with me. That's residual income. That's what I want to do. Well, the next 3 or 4 companies I joined were nutritional companies. This is back in the early 70s. And they all took off. And for one reason or other, they died. And so I specialized in starting to, because then I was a pilot, commercial airline pilot, I could fly and check out these companies. And so I started doing that. And I thought there's got to be a way you can project the potential success in a company. And so over the next 20, 30 years, I learned a lot. I sat at every table that you sit in as a network marketer, as we call it today. I've been an investor and an owner. I've been a vice president of marketing a couple of times back in the 70s. I've been a consultant, and I've also been in the field as a distributor. And that's where I love to be, in the field with people, because I feel the most important thing we do, and we get a good program, is the mindset we have. which, by the way, I want to really thank David and Mark and Michael and everybody, because they talk a really good mindset, and it's so important that we have. And we're not complaining in things at times, but we're contributing to, okay, what can we do to make this better? How do we solve that? Or in other words, we're solution oriented as our mindset rather than complaining. Now, I understand. I've been burnt by companies, and I question things all the time. In fact, I developed a long line of things. But I have certain things that we can do that another time, because I really look through and determine and say no to most companies. I will just say that here, I was impressed. I think it was Mark's story, how he had worked with Danny before, as Michael and others have, and it was a no-brainer to them. They'd had success, so what Danny's doing, we'll do. And I understand that, because my number one thing is the philosophy of the owners and the managers, because that'll determine the principles they'll operate by. And I'm not so worried about startup, even though it's always challenging. I've started up a couple of companies, and it's very hard. There's so many things that you don't see as a distributor. But I could see how they would jump in with Danny just because of that. But I usually do a pretty much in-depth, and it becomes pretty clear. And I don't mean this negatively, but I want you to know that most of the time I have to tell people that their baby's ugly, and nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly. I'm talking about their company, because there's some glaring red flags that I would not get involved. I will say at this point, in case that I should forget it, that I am so excited about GPS and its potential, and what Danny's doing, and what the people surrounding him doing, and the long-term effects. And I look at this, as some of you heard me say, like a surfer out waiting for that big wave. And when you see that swell start coming, you see they put their focus on the beach, and they start paddling with everything they have, all their energy, going as fast as they can. So when that wave catches them, if it's that big one, it'll carry them a long ways on the energy of the wave. And the skill that the swimmer has developed will help him take advantage of that. And so that's where a lot of you are positioned. Other of you, maybe this is your first time looking at this, you're wondering about it. Get with the person who told you about it. Get back with them, ask questions, as we say about buying a car, kick the tires, look under the hood, and decide whether it's for you. And it's not for everybody. We self-eliminate all the time growing up. How many start out playing soccer? And then by the time you get to high school, self-limited, oh, I can't go to practice. I don't want to do this. Every day we have to do this. And so people self-eliminate. And they will continue to do this in network marketing too. On the other hand, this could be exactly what people are praying for and looking for, particularly at this time, to change the circumstances in their lives. And if it is, I can just say without reservation at this point, that this could be one of the biggest and best network marketing opportunities I've ever seen. There's going to be challenges, but Danny and the people he's working with are out in front of that wave. And so what does that wave mean to you and I? It means that what you do in the next 30 days, a year from now, may take 3 or 6 months to get the same results. Because very few people have heard about it. Most people don't know what it is. As you have an opportunity of telling it, asking questions so they think, is this fit for me? How could I do this? Who do I know? Making their list. All those type of things. If you take massive action at this point, it can be absolutely rewarding. Now, will there be bumps in the road and stuff? There always is. That's why we have management, to solve the problems and so on. But I don't want to take much more time, Danny. I hope that I've maybe covered a few things, but the 5 things that have really made big things in my life is growing up on a farm, learning the law of the harvest and hard work, sports, learning how to develop skills, work hard, teamwork, as a pilot, being able to fly all over the world. I tell people all the time, in over 30 years of being a pilot, I've always reached my destination. And if you were with me or your family was with me, you're glad that's true. But it wasn't without a lot of planning and effort and so on. There's so many lessons I can talk about that. Napoleon Hill was the key thing that helped me get focused, helped me understand who I am, who I wanted to become. And he used to say, saying things are powerful, but doing them is more powerful. But neither is as good as who you become in doing it. So as we go through these things, I would encourage each of you to pick a time each year where you self-evaluate. I've been doing it for probably over 40 years now. I do it on my birthday. It's a few days after New Year's, and that's because a lot of my New Year's resolutions and things I want to put in, I don't believe in New Year's resolutions. Those are wishes. But in my goals, I wanted to watch all the football games and maybe snack a little bit. And so I didn't do mine till my birthday in about mid-January. But what you do there to help you be successful, the number one is I found it's really good to look 5 years down the road. And David Bird teaches this very well. 5 years down the road, just have a dream sheet. It's not a goal. It's what if everything is, I could have whatever, here's what I do, here's where I'd be, here's where I'd live, this is the vacations I take, those type of things. And then bring it down to a yearly goal. What am I going to do this year that'll bring me closer to that 5 years? Now, when you write down that 5-year thing, you write it down with everybody you know is 5 years older and what they've done or doing, so that the important things in your life are included there. Then this yearly goal. And then the yearly goal is broken down into monthly plans. What are my plans? What am I going to do this to get my yearly goal? And then the most important is daily activities. And learn to find the things that are high payoff activities, the things that bring the most results, and then have a way of measuring that. In fact, I like to talk about SMART goals. SMART goals is very specific because the subconscious mind can only deal with very specific things. In other words, you can't go out and say, I want a new car. You got to describe the car, the year, the 6-way adjustable seats, the stereo, all that stuff. So it gets in mind, and you start visualizing that, putting it up on your wall. And that's the first thing that I really challenged the philosophy with. And 6 months later, that car showed up in my driveway. So I know it works. I know it can work for anything that you do. But so specific, needs to be measurable, needs to be achievable, it needs to be realistic, and have a time frame. We all need deadlines to make things happen. So one of my good friends may be on this call today. He was being evaluated by a mentor and went through this SMART goal thing, and they said, well, your goals are SMAT, not SMART. Why is that? Because it's not reasonable, it's not reachable and stuff. It's not realistic. And so you got all the other things, but you got to be more realistic in it, in the time frame and so on. But I think that as we work together, one of the reasons I wanted to mention that I really like network marketing is because usually there is a mindset that's taught. There is a personal development thing. There is self-improvement. And that's what we all need, so that we understand that we can have, do, and be anything we want if we understand these principles and we apply them over time, because knowledge is power, but only if it's applied. And when we apply these things and develop the correct habits, I mentioned last night too that David Bird talks about the next level growth. If you're here and you want to get to the next level, it takes an effort, it takes a push, it takes in sports and whatever, you got to really do things. And so his definition of this next level growth is the process, meaning your philosophy and how you live it. So you have to know that. Who am I and how do I live the philosophy and who am I trying to become? So it's that process of making the right choices consistently over a sustained period of time. The process of making the right choices consistently over a sustained period of time. If we do that, you can have anything you want. And if you decide to join with us here in GPS, I love it because in my car, GPS now tells me exactly where to go, get me there. Now we got something that's different, but same title that's going to get us maybe some of the other things we really want in life. So thank you so much, Mr. Danny Bay. Can't say enough good about you. I will tell you one last thing. I'm sorry to keep going on. Is that I've been doing a lot of calling and asking about Mr. Danny Bay because I didn't know him personally, but I've had the opportunity to talk to him some and all this. And this is what I will say that's very unique. I like to call people who maybe wouldn't like the person, who has competed against them, or been in a different team in a company, because you can usually find negatives about people, whether they're true or not. There's people who are jealous or whatever, will say negative things. I can't find anybody that says one negative thing about Danny Bay, even when they have reasons to, or opportunities to. They say, boy, what a brilliant young man, what a hard worker, he's so kind, he does things. And so that validation is huge to me. That's the type of person I want to be associated with. I want to go to the top so I could be with people like Danny and each of you that's on this line. So thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much, and have a wonderful, blessed day. And in your part of the world, and Danny, for you over in Korea.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Del Williams. Wow. Took so much notes right now, guys. We're so blessed to have some incredible leaders, industry experts, join GPS and just give us all of the wisdom. So just like you heard from Mr. Del Williams, let's take action. Just like you heard from Mr. Danny Bay every single day this week, that we only have about 2 weeks left until we officially launch GPS here in the States. So just a reminder to everybody, tonight we have Mr. Tommy Lee doing the presentation. Tomorrow morning is our final Good Morning GPS Leadership with Chairman Mr. Danny Bay. Tomorrow night we also have our presentation, and this Saturday, let's roll everybody into the training. But one thing I do want to remind everybody is, don't just use the meetings we have in the evening once a day to expose this to people. Let's make sure we have exposures going out throughout the day, and use the night events as second exposures, third exposures, because the more they're exposed to the GPS opportunity, the more likely they're gonna get involved. So let's promote very hard. We only have 2 weeks left. I'm just excited to have all of you this morning with Mr. Del Williams, where we got some golden nuggets. So I appreciate you, Mr. Williams. It is such an honor to have you on our team. I'm so excited we're gonna be growing together, learning from you, and just taking nuggets from your wisdom. So appreciate you. Have a great day, everybody. God bless you guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Bye-bye.